Hello, my name is Osha. I normally talk about American presidents. Yeah, that's my elevator speech. And in addition, I discuss, the law. And of course, I've been talking about my experience with injustice in Montgomery County, Maryland, as superintended by a corrupt judge, Judge James Bonifant of Montgomery County, Maryland. Now, I understand he won't be a judge anymore on March the 14th, 2026. Of course, I've given my bio that I have a law degree from George Washington University Law School. So apart from the fact that having a judge committing fraud on the court or using abusing the process to actually obstruct justice, because that's what this whole defamatory charges against me, the malicious prosecution against me in Montgomery County, Maryland. I've done videos discussing what's been going on. I'm not going to get into that now. Um, Apart from the fact that it is contemptible in the law that a judge should be should be partial, should not show impartiality and neutrality and respect the Constitution and the rights of the accused, and dismiss a case that's clearly based on um, falsified evidence, right? Fabricated evidence, perjury, right? The judge is aware of that. The judge himself has been committing perjury. There was an attorney who requested a bribe on behalf of the judge and the state attorney, right? And the judge has done things that are, you know, abusing the process, wrongfully committing me, right? Wrongfully committing me uh, in order to obstruct justice or, maybe cover up for the attorney who requested a bribe on his behalf and on behalf of the state attorney. I don't know. And to protect, the police misconduct, apart from all of that, the fact that it violates the integrity of the legal system. Today's Sunday, right? And so I went to church. I'm actually a Christian, and so my parents were devout Christians themselves, and I don't like to tout my Christianity. I don't do that because one, I'm a very educated person. I think my leading with, well, I'm a Christian. Many people use it as a as a as a tool, as a hypocritical tool, right? They use it to bloviate, to grandstand, or to manipulate people. They talk about their religion to manipulate people. And sometimes, it can be offensive, when, you're because America is a nation where there's freedom of religion. And in addition, I think when I lead with my faith, which I think is private, it's personal to me. When I lead with that, I think it tends to take away from other parts of me that I find very interesting, that are that are significant. For instance, it takes away from the fact that, well, I'm also a scientist because I was a STEM major at Columbia University, right? So I'm somebody I think with a scientific mind, and many times Christians are misrepresented as people who believe in fairy tales and myths and superstitions, right, and things that are imaginary, right. So that detracts from that. It detracts from the fact that I'm a very logical, objective, and analytical person who values critical thinking, right. My actions are informed by critical thinking because one, I was also an accounting major. I was a business, I have an MBA. It takes away from those other things. And the fact again that, as I said, I have a law degree. So, I don't want to be one-sided, and, uh, I let people see who I am from my actions, right? But today is Sunday. I went to church. There was excellent service today. The sermon was excellent. I loved it. And so I wanted to demonstrate that it's not only opprobrious in our legal system, right? In the legal profession, that there should be a judge should pervert the course of justice. My faith, right, also hates injustice, right? It's in the Bible. Now, I've done videos that will be able to demonstrate that a lot of what we got to be English common law, which is part of what we use, right, was also uh, found its provenance from Christianity, canon law, theological law, the work of theologians, right? Excuse me if I can't say the word appropriately. So I'm going to show in the Bible, I want to read today areas where it demonstrates how God hates injustice, how God hates corrupt judges, right? And so that's part of, apart from the fact that it's part of my training to hate injustice and to fight against injustice, right, and to expose injustice. It's part of the legal profession. It's what we're supposed to do. As of the day I was assaulted in my home, May 16, 2023, I was an auditor in the Department of the Navy. My job was, to help in investigations of fraud, waste, and mismanagement. That was something I'd reported stuff, right, and that was under investigation. And lo and behold, coincidentally, or or it was all part of the intent, the objective. I was raided by a man who fabricated an emergency evaluation petition. Everything he wrote was perjury, and it was an ex parte order. There have been several ex parte orders. An ex parte order is when a judge gives an order regarding one party alone, right? And the other side is not there. Remember, I've talked about the principles of natural justice, right, which our legal system is based on in part, right? One principle is audi alteram partem, right? The right of the other side to be heard. You can't just hear one side. You have a right to confront. And then in the Sixth Amendment that I've discussed, you have a right to confront your accuser. If somebody accuses you of a crime, you have a right to put up a defense. You have a right to cross-examine your accuser and ask them, present witnesses, right, to question them, right? But I have not had that chance, and this case is now going on over 3 years, right? It's almost 3 years. The trial date has been pushed back to August 2026 by the judge, Judge James Bonifant, and it's all a malicious prosecution. It's intended to defame me, and it's intended to obstruct justice. So I'm going to read from scripture today from the Bible, King James version, and I'm reading the Shakespearean English. I've done videos in the past talking about the evolution of the English language because that's very, very important, right? It affects us. Our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, Bill of Rights were all written in English, and we speak English in America, right? So I'm going to be reading from King James Bible today, the Shakespearean version. And before I get into that, there was something that a story I wanted to quickly narrate, which influenced my decision on the law school I decided to go to. So it was this story about um, a story about um, a killing that occurred in one of the Jim Crow states. I don't know if it was Georgia, but one of those Jim Crow states. And this happened, way back when there was Jim Crow. So a white woman had been found murdered, right? She'd been killed, and her body was found in the warehouse of a Jewish businessman. He was a wealthy businessman, but he was not. It was a time when there was a lot of anti-Semitism in the United States, especially in the Jim Crow South, and of course, I guess the community sort of, was anti-Semitic, and there were people who were envious of the prosperity of the Jewish businessman. So he was accused of there was a false witness. Somebody came and, false witness said, well, it was the Jewish businessman who killed this woman. Um, well, it turned out in the end, what really happened was there was an escaped criminal or something, some other person murdered her, and the political brass, right, in the community decided to frame the Jewish guy just to get rid of him because they were envious of his business. So, um, at least he's charged with a crime, so he's in jail. He has a right to trial. But this was back in the day when a mob could just raid the county jail, and they would remove the accused, the defendant, and they could go and lynch the person. They did it many times, to black men, right? Black men would be framed, false charges against them, and whether false charges or not, where you get to prove if somebody is guilty or not guilty should be a trial, right? People are detained; they should have their day in court. So this Jewish person, this Jewish man, was in jail. The county jail was a mob, raided the county jail. He was kidnapped. They took him to a tree and they hanged him. Many years ago, many years later, after the hanging, the lynching of the Jewish man, one of the people um, one of the officials uh, who was a participant in the heinous, lynching, um, disclosed the people, the members, the participants in the lynching, the people who went. They had hoods, right? They were dressed like the KKK. When the KKK used to wear hoods, so they wore hoods, they covered up in hoods, and then they went to go and get the accused, accused Jewish man, and they lynched him, right? They drove a car, they drove him in a car, kidnapped him, they went to lynch him. So eventually, it was disclosed. One of the participants was penitent, and he decided to disclose the people, the participants. Amongst the participants was a judge, was a sitting judge, right, in the South. So and this is a true story. uh, Learning this, the person who told the story narrated it much better than I'm doing now, right? Because I don't have a fresh recollection of the details, but the person was also an excellent storyteller, and you see him on TV a lot. He became my professor. He actually taught me torts. I'm not going to talk about what I felt about the class, his teaching style. He invited me. I was one of the people he invited to his house for a barbecue. And he's actually a famous professor. His name is Jonathan Turley, Professor Jonathan Turley. He was one of the people he spoke on behalf of, he testified on behalf of President Trump, I think during his first or second, one of the impeachments. He testified on his behalf. And, he's a pundit on television. You normally see Professor Jonathan Turley on TV. So he was my professor. He was one who narrated the story, and it was during my not before the orientation, right? We get a chance to, so after you've been uh, admitted to a law school, they do a some kind of reception for admitted students, so that so you can you can meet professors while you're trying to make your decision on which school to go to. So I'd been admitted to other schools, but uh, that story that Professor Turley told influenced me, because he's such a, and I guess the George Washington University Law School intentionally uses him to to present at those receptions because he's such a good storyteller. And I guess that's why he's a pundit on television, right? He's an expert at storytelling, right? And I think his expertise is he does criminal law as well. I think he does. Not all lawyers, by the way, go to court, go to trial. Majority of lawyers do not appear in court; they don't go to trial. But I think he is a litigant, right? He goes to trial. He's a trial lawyer. That's his expertise. So he knows how to hold an audience. He knows how to tell a story. So he told this story so effectively, and at the end, he had a message about judges are supposed to be upholding the law, and they should be above board and things like that. And so he let you see the ignoble, the contemptible, uh, how heinous it was that a judge should participate in the lynching of a man who was to stand trial. That was murder, right? And so it was outrageous. But that I had to tell that story because that moved me. That was what the deciding factor. That was why I decided to go to George Washington University Law School because he told Professor Jonathan Turley told a very good story at our reception. Um, yeah, so, and remember what Oliver Wendell Holmes said, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said in the case Silverthorne Lumber Company versus United States of 1920. I've mentioned it many times, and that was the case that actually established it's the origin of the fruit of the poisonous tree, which was coined by Justice Frankfurter in another case in 1939, Adoni versus United States. But Silverthorne, um, Silverthorne Lumber Company versus United States in 1920 was one that actually really established the it didn't coin that, it didn't use that phrase, fruit of the poisonous tree, but it used that the derivative of an illegal search was inadmissible in court, had to be excluded. And there was something he said that it is a lesser evil for a few criminals to escape than for the government, right? For the government to play an ignoble part, right? That is in a crime, in misconduct. And that's what Judge Bonifant has been doing. That's what the state attorney have done. And, they've done all sorts of violations. And my rights have been violated. I've been defamed. I'm somebody who comes from a home. My father is a man of integrity. My mother is a woman of integrity. My brother is a professor, right? Is a renowned professor. Uh, I have a brother who is a senior federal civil servant in the federal government in Nigeria. I myself am a man of integrity, right? I'm a man of unimpeachable integrity. So I will fight to defend my integrity. I've been defamed by the apparatus, by those who are able to wield and corrupt the apparatus of states, right? The state apparatus in Maryland, and so that is the injustice that I'm fighting. So I'm going to have to show some dexterity because I don't want this camera to jump around. So let me get to it and read from the Bible. So there are verses, and I'll just state those verses that I want to focus on. And in case anybody wants to look them up, reading the Bible is very good. And another reason why I wanted to do this is for a friend of mine, right? There's a friend of mine. So I was sent to, he became my friend. And, in all this experience, there's, at least I made one friend from this terrible experience. So where I was sent, first of all, to do a competency evaluation, right? I was never using medication. I was not prescribed medication. I was found competent. But there was someone that I met, and he was a white guy. We became friends, and everybody started to, so you meet all sorts of persons. This was somebody who had his home, and just to show you how easily somebody can be locked up in jail. He was a white guy. He comes from upper middle class. In fact, both his parents work for the NSA, National Security Agency. That's, if you know what the NSA is, that's a big deal, right? And this guy, this guy, so he was there. I'm not going to tell this case, but somebody who owned this house. But you can end up in jail for the wrong reasons, right? You could just for the wrong reasons, right? So I'm not going to give details, but the thing is, something that he noticed, he said, well, he noticed I'm always calm, that I'm never moved, right? And everybody else in here needs drugs to be calm. They need to be medicated. But I'm never moved. I'm never that, even apart from the fact that yes, I don't have a mental illness. If they brought many people who do not have a mental illness, they can break down and start displaying symptoms of mental illness. I never did, and he wanted to know why I was always so calm. So, and this person has become my friend. He's a white guy. He's one of the people who supported me, right, in all of this, right? So I'm just going to mention, when I talk about Black History Month in honor of, people who do still suffer from systemic racism, it's not because I'm racist or I don't have white friends. I have white friends, but I think many of these people acknowledge that, yes, there is institutionalized corruption. There is racism in the system, right? This person understood that I was suffering an injustice, right? It was an injustice that I'm experiencing injustice right now, an unjust judge. So part of what makes me calm, I encourage people, if people can be familiar with the Bible. It's a book of wisdom. It's also a spiritual book. I was fortunate that both my parents are Christians, and my mother had me read it, from cover to cover since I was a child. I wanted to learn it. I wanted to study it, and I was very fortunate for where I was going to church. I learned, and I've always been a student of the Bible, and so it's something that helps. It's guidance for life, and it's good for it's good for the health. The verses I'm going to be reading from, again, I'm going to have to display dexterity today. I don't want the camera jumping around. Proverbs 17, verse 15. There's Deuteronomy 16, verse 19. There's Leviticus 19, verse 15. There's Proverbs 11, verse 1. There's Second Chronicles, verse 19, 6 to 7. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. So these are basically demonstrating how God hates injustice, right? How God thinks, a corrupt judge is an abomination. A judge who shows impartiality is an abomination. A judge should not, it's contemptible for judges to correct bribes, or to respect the poor and look down on to respect the rich and look down on the poor and things like that. So let me get to it. And so the first one I'm going to look for is Proverbs 7. Let me see. Let me start with Leviticus 19:15, because it's easier to get to. I'll just try and, rather than jumping around the Bible. Let me see. 19 verse 15. Okay. Oh, already you've over 20 minutes. I'll be fast. So get ready for Shakespearean language. Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Thou shalt not respect the person of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty, but in righteousness shalt thou judge thy neighbor. This is referring to judges, right? And something else I wanted to add. I'm going to read verse 16. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people, neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord. So don't be a talebearer. So remember, I've talked about fabrications, how Judea went to make false statements to the police. There have been all sorts of fabrications, and we haven't had a day in court, right? So my mom's gone to court to prove that Judea filed a malicious perjury in the emergency evaluation petition. He's been telling lies. My neighbor, he brought a neighbor of mine, to fabricate a peace order saying I kidnapped him. All sorts of fabrications, right? And I haven't had a day in court. So those things are frowned on by God, But let me carry on. So the next one is, let me see. Let me try and see. I can read Deuteronomy 16:19. 16 verse 19. Okay. Yep. So Deuteronomy 16 verse 19, it says, thou shalt not wrest judgment, thou shalt not respect persons, neither take a gift, for a gift doth blind the eyes of the wise and pervert the words of the righteous. So that's saying that do not take a bribe, right? A gift, right? It's telling the judges that they shouldn't take bribes, right? It's a warning against judges who take bribes. The next one I'm going to read is Second Chronicles 19, 6 to 7, right? And I hope you can understand. Even though it's Old English, it's Shakespearean English. 16. Second Chronicles 19:67. So Second Chronicles chapter 19 verse 6 to 7. So it says right here, and said to the judges. Okay, let me start from 5 so we can understand the context, right? So this is a king Jehoshaphat. He appointed judges, right? Judges were always very important in Israel. So it says from verse 5, it says, and he set judges in the land throughout all the fenced cities of Judah, city by city, and said to the judges, take heed what ye do. Ye judge not for man, but for the Lord, who is with you in the judgment. Wherefore now let the fear of the Lord be upon you. Take heed and do it, for there is no iniquity with the Lord our God, nor respect of persons, nor taking of gifts. So that's Shakespearean language. It's a bit different, right? So it's warning again against bribes, judges taking bribes, or showing partiality in judgment. So I'm getting there. Now let me go to Proverbs, book of Proverbs. I'm going to read Proverbs 11, verse 1, first of all. So Proverbs 11, verse 1, it says, a false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight, right? So a false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. So it's showing that God hates a partial judge, a judge who's showing partiality, who's corrupt, right? Who makes bad rulings, corrupt rulings, right? That's basically what it's saying. And then we read Proverbs 17, verse 15. Proverbs 17, verse 15. He that justifieth the wicked, and he that condemneth the just, even they both are abomination to the Lord. So you can see the harsh language, right? The harsh language, saying, well, that judging unfairly, it's an abomination to God, right? And uh, I'm not delusional in saying Judge Bonifant has perverted the course of justice, or he's committed fraud upon the court, or there's been an abusive process, there's been procedural unfairness perpetrated by Judge James Bonifant. He's actually told lies in court. He's wrongfully ordered a competency to stand evaluation twice when there was no justification, right? I'm a lawyer, I have a law degree. I'm not mentally ill. I've never been mentally ill. I didn't complain. I'm not using a temporary insanity as a defense. So he has no reason to be, there was no basis, no justification for him to violate my zone of privacy rights and tell lies. By the way, and I saw the false document that he wrote, the lies, the perjury, the libel he wrote, saying I had a mental illness and that was why he was committing me to. He did it twice. He first did with one psychiatric hospital, that hospital, and then he gave false statements. They gave the police, they had fabrications, they had fabricated stuff, right? Perjury, defamatory stuff, libel about what I did, just telling lies, right? If they accused me of something where I get to prove, we get to prove or disprove it in court, at trial. But when he goes behind and he uses back channels, right? And what I've been accused of, and I haven't been given a chance to say my side of the story and disprove it, and he uses this false narrative to pass me through a system that's actually constitutes witness tampering, right? Because when he sends you to a psychiatric hospital, he's you know and the psychiatrist is trying to coerce you to accept the false statements by the police, right? In the charge statements, the police wrote fabrications, distortions, right? When they're trying to coerce me to accept that statement, uh, that's witness tampering, and the judge has been abusing the process, doing that. There's been an abusive process, and Judge Bonifant has been outright committing libel and telling lies, right? So Fortunately, those psychiatric hospitals themselves then said, no, that I don't have a mental illness. But the thing is, there's a practice, a corrupt practice that goes on in Maryland, um, in which a judge lies, right? A judge, like Judge James Bonifant, tells a lie that this person has a mental illness, go and treat them. Because there are people who probably don't have a mental illness, but they will break down there again due to iatrogenic symptoms. They may, because of the shock, the abuse of the process, right? And they might be shocked and just develop a mental illness or breakdown, right? I haven't broken down because, I'm somebody who is faithful. God has been good to me, has been faithful. He's preserved me despite the atrocities and abuses by Judge James Bonifant. And so God hates injustice and God will preserve our integrity. So if I come across more verses in the Bible just showing how God is against an unjust judge, that those who will stand by their integrity, God will protect them. Remember in the book of Daniel, the story of Daniel, right? There was a law, an unjust law. There were false accusers who lied that, they said Daniel had violated the law about bowing down and worshiping the god that the king had put forth, the idol of gold that the king wanted everybody to worship. But Daniel was someone who was a believer. He worshipped God, the Almighty God, right? Yahweh. He worshipped God, and he bowed down to only God, right? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Um, and God preserved him when they threw him in the lion's den, right? God preserved him and took care of him. So it doesn't matter, right? It was like I was in the lion's den when I was sent to jail, sent to the psychiatric hospital twice. But everywhere, right, God caused me to find favor. Their own psychiatrist, that was the last thing Bonifant was saying, right? He was saying, well, that even the two psychiatrists have said I have no mental illness. Because he kept saying, well, I'm rigid. Because he's been trying to help the state to coerce me to accept a wrongful plea bargain, an unfavorable plea bargain. The objective is for me to take a plea bargain that will prevent me from going back to work in the federal government, right? Because this is what this whole thing is about, right? It's to aid the people who committed corruption, right, in the federal government, Department of Defense and Department of the Navy. Jamie A. Simon, who committed perjury and acts of moral turpitude, and Kirsten Risbeck, who committed perjury and acts of moral turpitude, and others, including Nefertari McBride, who tried to now support them, falsified government records, tried to use her position to obtain, to conduct a quid pro quo relationship, used her position. That's Nefertari McBride, when she was Assistant Auditor General of the Navy. Or audit director, or whatever her position was, and Nathan R. Brown, who falsified government records and also used his position to extort and commit other misconduct. So these are people I reported. That's my constitutional right to petition, to report. That's my right as a federal government employee. I did my job, and I'm supposed to be protected by the Whistleblower Protection Act, but somehow, according to GDAY, they suborned him to go and fabricate evidence, right, against me, to go and fabricate an emergency evaluation petition against me. So remember, God protected Daniel in the Bible, right? God protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You can go and read it. It's in the book of Daniel so many times. Joseph was falsely accused, right? He was first thrown in to slavery by his own brothers, right? And then for doing the right thing, Potiphar's wife accused him falsely of trying to commit rape, right? So it took a long time. It took 13 years for him to be vindicated. But when God vindicated Joseph, right? God does not leave you if you stand by your integrity, right? So that's why I was reading this today. Another reason I did this was because, I'm doing these videos, and there are people, of course, in my church who support me, and there are people who will see this. Many are not trained in the law. My church, our Christians, we normally stay out of trouble. I'm a middle-aged man. I'd never been in trouble. I was working. If I were a troublemaker, the United States Department of Defense the Department of the Navy, they would never hire me and put me in classified areas and give me a top secret clearance. I hold a top secret TSSCI. That's the highest national security clearance you can have. They don't throw it at people, right? Many people don't know what it is. Well, I didn't know what a TSSCI was until I joined the federal government and they said they wanted to give me one, right? I didn't know what it was. So, but it means the government respects you. The government respects your integrity. The government values you. The government respects your judgment. And all of a sudden, I'm being locked up on false charges. So, as Christians, I'm also doing this in response to my friend who's been great, who supported me. He's a white guy. So, when I'm doing it's Black History Month, I don't bash on white people. I'm somebody who has friends from all over the across the board, whether it's Asians, it's white people, it's Black people, it's African Americans, or my Nigerian people, right? But the thing is, one of the things that you want to do as a broad-minded person, and I'm a man of faith, is we speak the truth, right? We speak the truth, and I'm not reckless with my words. I wouldn't be doing these videos on YouTube if if my rights weren't violated, if I were not imprisoned, right? I'm free. I'm not locked up in jail. I'm not wearing a GPS. I'm even free to travel now, according to the last public defender I had. Uh, but there's a false defamatory case against me. It's prevented me from going to my work. I didn't get all these degrees, do 16 years in the university to be doing YouTube videos, to not have anything to do. If I don't, I'm an American citizen. And with my credentials, I can work internationally. I can work in Nigeria. There are businesses I started. I gave them up in order to serve the United States Department of Defense. But there's this false charge. It's going on 4 years now. I got to learn from, Judge Bonifant's misconduct, right? How the biggest recipients of welfare are federal government and, public servants. Some public servants like Judge Bonifant were not doing their job. They waste taxpayer money, right? Anyway, I'm going to stop here. My name is Osha. Today's Sunday, and I will keep you posted. Thank you.